just stepping onto the old porch of that house with my boot. I felt the cold sting of contradiction pierce my chest. I'd accepted Riley's invite to escape the city, pretending it was just another one of those weekends filled with bad jokes, crackling bonfires, and cheap beer. Deep down, my head was a messy pile of confusions I never had the guts to share with anyone. I work in a factory. Concrete floor, oil smell, equipment noise. There, the world made sense because no one asked too many questions. But behind the routine, I'm just a 23-year-old Bostonian, kinda broken, trying to pick up the pieces after my heart got tossed around like a skipping stone in a pond. Subscribe to the channel and leave a like for more stories like this. Ever since I was a kid, I always liked observing everything around me, keeping things to myself. I guess that's why, even now, people don't really see what's going on inside. Like I'm transparent. My introverted nature is both armor and a prison. My best friend Riley only knows half the story. The other pages I hide, including stuff about him, and especially about his brother. Now, here I am, neck deep in rural Massachusetts, in a country house pulled straight from an old memory, and I had no idea on that first chilly morning that the oldest secrets were about to wake up. If you've ever had days where everything seems ordinary, but one small detail changes everything, don't forget to subscribe and leave a like, because you'll definitely see yourself in this story. Riley's family house is in a secluded part of the Yorkshire Hills. Everything there just oozes nostalgia. Scattered around the entrance were muddy boots and dry branches. The smell of pine filled the hallway. The floorboards creaked, as if each plank was quietly whispering the secrets of the last 20 years. What you hear here is just the beginning. The complete, unfiltered stories with all the details you can imagine are available now. Check the link in the description right now. Waking up, you could smell fresh coffee mixed with fireplace smoke. The dusty windows framed the morning mist, and outside, the silence was only broken by crows perched on dead branches. I was working on the porch wood, sanding an old bench, listening to the rhythmic sound of metal scraping that kept me anchored in the present. Riley showed up with his usual energy, already yelling, "Grab the bread, Cole! Today's a real breakfast day!" We laughed at silly things and sat on the stone patio eating buttered bread while he told me childhood stories. The afternoon was consumed by the comfortable boredom timer. Firewood for the bonfire, inventing awful recipes, fishing in the lake, small arguments about which old movies deserved a second chance. When it got dark early, Riley would challenge the darkness, swearing he knew every sound that came from the dense woods right behind the house. My routine there felt both new and old. It wasn't bitter solitude. Sometimes I felt like these breaks were what little peace I had left after so much internal chaos. I'd lost people, trusted the wrong ones, swore emotions wouldn't surprise me anymore. That was the plan until then. The end of the peace came with the muffled rumble of an engine coming up the dirt road. Neither Riley nor I were expecting anyone, especially not so early on a Saturday. I heard heavy footsteps, a door slamming, and only when I looked up at the door, I felt that familiar chill run through my veins. Hunter was standing there, leaning against the doorframe, as if he did it every day. It had been almost 2 years since I last saw his brother. He had the same calm gaze, a light beard, strong arms, and a subtle weariness on his face, that kind of maturity you can't buy. So suddenly the silence turned into another kind of noise. Hunter dropped his keys on the table, gave a small smile just for me, but looked away as if he didn't want to give away what he was feeling. Riley threw himself at his brother, laughing, feigning anger. "You vanished, didn't even say you were coming." Hunter explained in a calm, almost monotone voice that he'd stopped by because the farm manager needed help with the electrical work. He had to change some wires. It was all so natural it almost went unnoticed. But in my chest, an old storm was brewing. I knew, even if I didn't want to, that my mind had never really forgotten his way. Our first conversation was just a, "Hey Cole," followed by my "Hunter, long time no see," and a quick handshake, a second longer of contact than usually happens between two old acquaintances. Riley, oblivious, was already planning what games we'd play that night. I caught a glimpse of how our differences and similarities clashed. Hunter was reserved, observant, Riley expansive, chaotic, me, an enigma on the outside, anxiety on the inside. The curious thing was how, even after so much time apart, Hunter's presence never truly faded from my memory. As the day went on, Hunter fit right in as if he'd never left. He helped Riley fix the fallen fence out back, then called me to get tools from the shed. I tried to act like everything was under control, but with every glance, every prolonged silence between conversations, my attention wavered. By late afternoon, I started making dinner with Riley, grilled burgers. Hunter showed up in the kitchen with a jar of pickles, laughed at our cooking disaster, and ended up staying to chop onions. We shared laughs trying weird recipes, and in that cramped space, we'd accidentally bump into each other, sidestepping almost like a rehearsed choreography. I never let on any intention beyond friendship, but my body noticed every proximity as if it were skin on skin. After dinner, we went to organize firewood for the bonfire. Hunter insisted on carrying the heavier pieces, and I pretended to keep him company, just to not be left out. Riley was already yelling from across the yard. We stood there, Hunter and I, chatting for a few minutes. We talked about his work as an electrician, the differences from city life, tried to guess constellations. In the simplicity of these tasks, I noticed how his presence was calming me, and, at the same time, making the air denser by the minute. Riley, in his role as an unconscious facilitator, wove jokes and memories, but sometimes he'd wander off to grab a drink, and for a few seconds I realized how his absence forced us to face the silence together. A discreet complicity, without promises or questions. Something was growing there, slowly and without a name. Despite the light atmosphere, old doubts started knocking. I looked at Hunter, and deep down felt afraid of what might happen. I didn't know if what I felt was just a projection of someone clinging to what they can't have, or if he too actually harbored something for me. What if I was just feeding an illusion? Worse, if Riley noticed anything, the damage would be irreparable. How far was it worth risking years of friendship for feelings that never dared to step out of line? The weight of doubt left me silent for hours. Every action calculated, every word thought twice before being spoken. That afternoon, the clouds hung heavy in the sky and the cold threatened a sudden change in weather. As we organized tools in the shed, Hunter let slip that he was there more because he needed a break than out of obligation. He mentioned, without much detail, recurring work mishaps and old friction with his dad. "Sometimes I find it easier to fix wires than people," he said, looking at the ground. I felt a knot in my throat, the urge to admit I knew exactly what it was like to prefer silence over confrontation. But I wasn't able to open my heart so quickly. The day ended with Riley chasing phone signal, worried about a call from the store he managed in the city. He complained loudly, cursed the lack of Wi-Fi, but didn't realize that, deep down, his temporary absence was starting to create a new space between me and Hunter. The territory of secrets, where fear and desire blurred, was officially open. And it was clear there, as night swallowed the hills, that I wouldn't be able to pretend for long, not even to myself. Night slowly arrived, as if time had decided to move in slow motion just to heighten the annoying tension between Hunter and me. Riley, after much complaining about the cell signal, got an important call that changed everything. The store manager said there was a serious stock problem, and he needed to go back to the city that same night. He tried to minimize the stress, but I read in his eyes the rush and the guilt of abandoning us in the middle of nowhere. 2 hours later, he almost flew out in his car, and the house filled with silence, the kind that doesn't calm you down. It just makes every tiny noise heavier. I stayed on the porch, watching the darkness spread across the fields, when I heard Hunter messing with the fireplace. The house's electricity decided to die along with the rest of the city lights. The darkness was instant, only broken by the orange glow of the flames. He appeared at the door with a box of candles in his hand, with a half smile, the kind you only improvise on rule-free nights. I decided to go in and sit next to him on the rug. The fire's heat was the only thing warming the room, and suddenly, it felt like everything in there became narrower. Hunter lit 2 big candles and put a bottle of bourbon between us, tossing the lighter away with a silent confirmation that there was nothing left to do but sit there, waiting for the light to come back. He stretched slowly, leaning his back against the couch, and looked at me as if he wanted to see beyond my face. "It was good you came," he said, in a low voice, almost a whisper. I nodded, feeling the words stick in my throat. The smell of bourbon mixed with smoke gave an almost unreal tone to that moment, like a memory that hasn't happened yet, but feels ancient. Hunter offered me a glass, and we accepted the silence. Sometimes he'd break the routine with simple but deep questions. "Are you happy with your life?" It caught me by surprise, because it wasn't just curiosity. There was sincerity in the way he listened to me. I spoke vaguely about work, city, loneliness. He listened to everything, attentively. I returned the same question, and I noticed the detail. Hunter was good with silence, but bad at admitting tiredness. "Being an adult is a collection of scars," he laughed. trying to lighten the mood, but I saw in the curve of his smile that shadow of longing that always lived in him. What was once just a suggestion turned into tension when he let his hand rest next to me. He didn't touch, just stayed close. I felt my skin heating up for no reason. It wasn't just the drink, it wasn't just the fire, it was him, and what we had been ignoring for years. When I went to adjust the pillow, his hand found mine, slowly, just our fingers entwined for brief seconds. It was light, but enough to raise old doubts and new certainties. The way he looked into my eyes said more than any phrase. "Trust me, Cole," he asked, softly, but it sounded like a gentle command, one impossible to refuse. My heart was beating wildly, racing, wanting to burst out of my chest. For moments, everything around us disappeared. The crackling fire, the creaks of the old house, the sweet smell of bourbon. There was only that minimal distance between my breath and his, waiting for a signal to cross. It was like crossing a border. When Hunter brought his face closer to mine, I first felt the warmth of his breath, then the hesitant touch, his lips on mine, in a firm kiss, without desperation, but full of old longing. The minutes there lasted like movie eternities. My skin felt electrified. The movement began subtly, his hands exploring slowly, going up my neck, down my arms, like soft waves hitting the sand. It was all so intense that just closing my eyes was enough to see every detail again. The texture of his hair between my fingers, the grays of his beard, the familiar scent that now completely enveloped me. We found our rhythm together, careful not to break the moment's enchantment. I felt Hunter's fingers trace paths on my back, drawing lines like someone sketching invisible maps in the dark. Goosebumps everywhere, each touch rekindling memories of old shivers, all stored in the cracks of time, waiting for this chance to be slowly unwrapped. The connection between lightness and fire came alive. The warmth of his body pressed against mine was almost an unspoken promise. Hunter explored my chest with a rare tenderness, as if every mark on my skin was a new story. His kisses migrated from my face to the curve of my neck, igniting every nerve as if a gentle lightning bolt had passed through. His fingers entwined with mine, suddenly, as if silently saying, "I'm here." I felt the strong, secure embrace, as if he wanted to protect me from the outside world. Nuances of desire, affection, and an absurd relief at finally living what had always been just dormant desire. The sound of breathing mingled with the crackling wood, the bourbon forgotten on the edge of the couch, the candles flickering and casting soft shadows on the walls, our clothes slowly yielding, in an almost sacred ritual, but without haste. It was like discovering the warmth of summer after a long winter. Hunter looked into my eyes with every movement, always attentive to any sign. His touch held respect, but also hunger, and I found myself willing to give everything, like someone entrusting an old secret to hands that knew how to decipher it. Our legs slowly tangled and our bodies adjusted, seeking a perfect fit. Our muffled sighs painted the end of fear, washed away shame, fueled desires never confessed before that night. The minutes there seemed to defy the clock. Everything was built just right. The way he pulled me close, chest to chest, walling off the outside world, made me realize how freedom can be found in small spaces, in honest gestures. The phrase, "open your chest," never made so much sense, because Hunter, in that embrace, in that warmth, in that touch, managed to transform my old armor into a living, pulsing whole body. The climax of the encounter was a gentle whirlwind. Bodies together, hearts stumbling, everything else forgotten. It was as if the house, the hills, the night itself breathed along, blessing that silent, truthful surrender. After all of it, we just lay there, the silence filled with a newfound calm. Hunter stayed beside me, his hand resting on my shoulder, mending wounds I didn't even know had names. There was no rush, just us, our bodies, warming each other as the fire slowly died down and the candles diminished, one by one. It wasn't anxiety anymore, or apprehension. I felt like all the years of expectations and doubts had shrunk. Hunter looked at me with those serious eyes and a quiet confidence. "We always knew, didn't we?" I laughed, resting my head on his chest, listening to his strong heartbeat, as if that was answer enough. The world seemed bigger and smaller at the same time. There was peace in sharing the space with him, without shame, without guilt. I noticed small gestures, like how he covered me afterwards, casually adjusting my hair. It was a kind of intimacy you can't fake. No words could explain it, but something had shifted. It wasn't just a night of desire. What was born there was a silent agreement of trust and renewal. Everything hurt less. The world seemed less hostile. For the first time in a long time, I didn't want to run from the next morning. I thought about how many times I had rehearsed all this in my head, imagining possible feelings, biting back the frustration of the unspoken. But now, there was no emptiness, just the potent sensation of belonging to someone, of being read without a caption, accepted without needing to apologize for my own crooked way of being. The impact of that moment was in every detail. Hunter lighter, me more whole, a complicity without guilt, without the fears from before. The fear of losing Riley's friendship remained in a corner, but it no longer guided me. Now, the desire was different, to live without hiding, without diminishing myself, without fear. We stayed like that, in silence, until we fell asleep. In the darkness of the unlit house, I felt that my story couldn't go back into secrecy anymore. I could only think that no matter how long it took, nothing would make me give up on that. The touch, the affection, the living truth of skin, of gaze, of trust. And just like that, on a random Saturday, everything in me changed temperature. The next day dawned sunny, as if the previous night hadn't broken the classic rhythm of the house and routine. The light gently filled the room, not quite piercing the edges of the mattress thrown in front of the fireplace. Hunter stirred first, slowly uncurling, as if afraid of scaring away the new, good silence that had settled between us. We exchanged shy smiles, and I felt in my chest the kind of peace that only someone who has spent years running away truly feels. It was different waking up next to him, without needing to hide, without needing to measure our actions. For the first time in a long time, I allowed myself not to rush out of bed, not to put on my armor, just to stay there, wrapped in his warmth and the moment. We stayed like that for a while, drifting between the haze of sleep and the silent joy of having done what once seemed unattainable. Hours passed without a sound, just a few comments about breakfast and the smell of firewood clinging to both our clothes. The intimacy was reflected in small gestures. Hunter grabbing my cup before I even thought to move, adjusting the strap of my shirt that had fallen off my shoulder, sitting close even with so much free couch space in the room. But every minute there was also tinged with an inevitable restlessness. Routine called us back, and Riley's absence, who messaged that he'd only be back at the end of the day, hung in the air like a gentle shadow, holding our secret just for us. It wasn't fear of him suddenly arriving, but the awareness that this, sooner or later, would need to be lived in the light of the real world. After breakfast, I helped Hunter clean up the few traces of our night. The makeshift sheets, the burnt-down candles, the forgotten glass in the corner of the fireplace. The texture of everyday life slowly returned, but there was something completely new. We were accomplices in a discreet pact, made with our fingertips and in the palm of silence. We looked at each other, and with that single gesture, we knew that this goodbye would be different this time. Hunter said he'd need to go back to the city right after lunch. Work, client commitments. He packed his things without a fuss, in his usual way, always practical, always reserved. For a moment, I felt a pang of fear, like someone afraid of waking up from the best dream of their life. I pretended to be distracted while washing the mug, wishing time would slow down. Before leaving, Hunter took my hands and led me outside the house. We walked slowly to the lake, the same one where, days before, we were just two acquaintances sharing jokes. Now, each step was a reminder of everything that had changed. We sat on the edge of the damp dock, our eyes lost in the reflection of the sky on the water, and the words came out low, almost whispered. "I don't want this to stay just here," he said, with a gentle firmness I hadn't known. For a long time, I thought it was better to forget. But I don't want to run anymore, Cole. I felt a good weight in my chest. Me neither. I just don't know yet what the path will be, you know? How to tell Riley, how to explain. Sometimes it feels like we have to split ourselves in half to fit into what people expect. Hunter smiled slightly and squeezed my hand. I guess it doesn't matter how long it takes. I won't disappear. Not this time. Time seemed to stop there. The wind blew dry leaves into the lake, and the water stirred gently. It forced a peaceful goodbye atmosphere, even with words unspoken. No one needed to say, "I love you," because now everything was in the gesture, in the effort to stay, even when life called us away. We went back inside in silence, nervously laughing while Hunter grabbed his jacket and got the car ready. At the door, another unhurried ritual. He hugged me, his chin resting on my shoulder, his arms slowly tightening, as if afraid of letting go of everything too soon. We stayed like that for long minutes, breathing together, our chests beating in the same rhythm, my face pressed against his chest, hearing that deep sound that felt like a promise. "Seriously, I won't disappear," he repeated, looking into my eyes. And it was there that the rush to live slowed down. I stood still at the door, watching the car disappear down the road, breathing deeply, mixing longing and joy into a new recipe. It felt like everything in me had changed. The way I waited, desired, even feared. I knew routine would return, that Riley would also return, that the world outside was still full of questions. But there, on the porch, as the house became just mine again, I felt that I was no longer alone as before. The rest of the day passed in slow motion. I tidied everything up, mentally revisiting every minute of the past night as the sun slowly set behind the trees. With Riley far away and Hunter on the road, the walls of the house echoed a very different solitude. This time, without the weight of secrecy, just the expectation of a new life beginning to be drawn. Shortly before sunset, I received a short message from Hunter. It was just a "got home safe" with a silly emoji. I laughed to myself, knowing that now every detail mattered. I put my phone in my pocket, looked at the lake, and knew, with a calm certainty, that this time I wouldn't give up before trying. For the first time, the future seemed like a real place. Back in the city, time moved differently. Commitments returned, hours at the factory felt heavy again, but everything carried a different taste, a new lightness. Hunter kept his promise. The following weekend, he showed up at my apartment gate without warning, with a backpack on his back and a lazy smile. We went up in silence, but the atmosphere that used to be tense turned into easy banter. Silly teasing, takeout food, old movies sharing space with whispered conversations on the couch. The best part was not having to hide. Seeing him sit there naturally, take off his jacket, and leave his keys scattered on the table was a new luxury. Small gestures, coffee made just right, a note left on the mirror, a warm hand in the cold of the night, were rewriting my idea of care and belonging. With each new meeting, the desire to share my world with him grew. We found ourselves dreaming aloud, eager to plan our next trips, laughing at the idea that we had already become one of those duos who understand each other with just a look. And at the same time, there was always that conversation. What will it be like when Riley finds out? It wasn't fear. It was respect. Our friendship was too important to be messed up by haste. We decided together to wait for the right moment, building everything calmly, without secrets, but also without rushing to reveal. Because for the first time, there was no urgency, just a pleasant desire to be present in the now. At work, breaks became more colorful. I found myself smiling for no reason, replying to his messages under the noisy machine, hiding the anxiety of someone waiting for the next weekend with the same joy as a kid at Christmas. Colleagues noticed. My mom noticed. But no one could explain the difference. After all, calm joy doesn't disguise itself. One afternoon, walking down the street, Hunter held my hand at the traffic light. A simple gesture, almost invisible. But for me, it was a revolution. No one looked, no one commented. And deep down, I discovered a new relief. I no longer needed to give explanations about who I was or who I chose to love. The old shame gave way to a timid, almost childlike courage to exist the way I always wanted to. There, walking hand in hand in the middle of the city's hustle and bustle, I felt that the ties had finally fallen away. Sometimes, an old fear strikes, of being rejected, of losing good things because of an impulse. But then I look to the side and see Hunter, hear a silly joke in my ear, feel his touch renewing everything, and remember my place in the world now. I learned that secrets can hurt, but honesty heals invisible wounds. I also discovered that tranquility is not the absence of desire. It's the perfect counterpoint to passion that doesn't need to be hidden. I look at the future with a different outlook. I don't expect perfection. I just want to keep discovering the details. Learn to share the tiredness of bad days and the laughter of good days. I want to face every difficult conversation as part of this process of growing together, owning up to mistakes, starting over as many times as needed, until everything makes sense again. If you've made it this far with a tight chest, smiling, identifying with the stumbles and successes, do yourself a favor. Don't hide what you feel. Sometimes it takes too long to surrender, to accept affection, to truly trust someone. Don't waste the chance to be happy for fear of judgment or outside glances. The world is too heavy for us to live half our lives repressing ourselves. If you're curious to know what it will be like when Riley hears the whole truth, I invite you to continue following my story. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell, because the journey is just beginning. There will be doubts, laughter, maybe some tears, but you can be sure there will be truth and love in the simplest and most beautiful way I can live it. What you hear here is just the beginning. The complete, unfiltered stories with all the details you can imagine are available now. Check the link in the description right now. And today, when I look at myself in the mirror before leaving, I grab my phone and see Hunter's message. Just a "good morning, miss you." And I realize that every risk, every fear overcome, was worth it to be exactly where I am. Free, light, whole. Until the next episode.